Hey, I'm David Morrissey from The Walking Dead, and you're listening to The Walking Dead Underground.
Now your hosts, Cinik, Igrihe, and Ryan.
And you are listening to The Walking Dead Underground, and I'm your host, Cinik. And joining me, as always, my co-host, and the podcast's very own answer to Morgan and Carol, Ryan and Igrihe. Finally, we have a new episode to talk about. So we review Honor, we talk about the fate of Carl Grimes, and the direction of the show. But before we get started, we at the podcast want to wish a full and speedy recovery to writer, director, and podcaster Kevin Smith. As he's recovering from a massive heart attack, he's a huge inspiration of mine, a big reason why I decided to pursue this project. So Kevin, get well soon. In what seems to be like forever, somewhere in the neighborhood around 10 weeks, the show actually had a little bit of momentum leading out. Alexandria was attacked, Maggie was surrounded and told to submit by Negan or else, and what's left of the kingdom rolled over and played dead and was taken by Gavin and the Saviors. What really sent the Deadheads into a tizzy, though, was the decision to snuff out the torch of the future, which was Carl Grimes, by having him bit in a senseless series of events. IG, what was your expectation leading into the mid-season premiere?
Well, I was expecting that Carl was going to die in the episode. I was expecting that we were going to see a little bit of movement on the places that were surrounded. Hoping upon hope that it was going to really get moving, knowing that it was going to be emotional watching Carl go. But I was hoping, and I didn't get it, that they were going to move past that, have it happen soon in the episode and let the vengeance begin. I was hoping for it because the first half of the season was remarkably slow. I think, to me, it seems like the first half seemed like it took place over about 2 days. And it needed to start picking up some time here.
How about you, Ryan? Did you want did you want it quick and painless, or did you want the long kiss goodbye?
It's hard to say. I think I wanted something moving, but I did kind of want quick and painless because, at the end of the day, his death has been kind of, we knew that this was going to happen, and we had 10 weeks, to think about it and read articles about it and deal with it. So even though, we didn't deal with it much on the show, we've dealt with it for a really long time. So I guess personally, I've kind of accepted it and would rather it have been quick and sweet, but I think he deserved he deserved more than that. But my expectation was it would be a long, drawn out cry fest for Carl, and it probably wouldn't be all that good. And they would try really hard to make it moving, but not really make it work. And that there'd be very little movement. So that was kind of my expectation for this episode.
I kind of wanted him to move past it a little bit. I wanted it to pick up because I wanted him to say his goodbye and kind of go out on a high note rather than it being long and drawn out. And to me, it was really reminiscent of what Negan did to everybody when he had them on the ground. It was almost torturous to watch. I don't know if torturous is a word or not, but it was almost torturous to watch. You felt you were right there with him. And I mean, the acting was great. We're coming out of a long break, and I wanted to see the storyline kind of kick into gear. Ryan, there's been a lot of anger and resentment towards Scott Gimple. A lot of I'm done posts, a lot of Walking Dead fan pages are just on fire, including our namesake, The Walking Dead Underground. But will people actually stop watching the show? And is there one character that you would just throw your hands up and say, I'm done, if they were to die?
A good show will make up for anyone dying. And I think The Walking Dead has made it clear. We've gone through some very, fascinating, well-developed, engaging characters. So it's not like they can't go without it. It's about whether or not the writing is good. For me, when I want to throw my hands up and give up on the show, it's just, because I'm done with, I'm frustrated with the writing. So I think that for me, more than anything, would determine whether or not, I want to continue. They can kill off everybody if it makes sense from a story perspective. And if they can, and if they can tell something that's compelling and that makes me want to, come back and watch it. So, I think that the outrage over Carl, because honestly, Carl's never been that interesting of a character. It's really only, at least on the show, it's only been the last, this past season or so that he's really kind of started to come into his own. But realistically, a year ago, I said, I don't care if he dies. And I think that the outrage was more, people finding an outlet for overall frustrations with the show and the writing over the past year and a half, 2 years. So I think that, the anger is, people are using Carl as the reason, but I think it's really the real reason is just more that overall the show has been on a bit of a downturn, and that's an easy thing to point to. But really, like most people, I don't think Carl is that significant as far as the show is concerned.
All right, IG, fill in the blank for me. If blank dies, we riot.
Well, I could go with the fandom and tell you about Daryl. But at this point, I don't know. Jerry, I think, is my number one pick. But King Ezekiel, in all reality, he's just done such an amazing job since coming on to The Walking Dead that I think he and Jerry could take the place of Rick and Daryl if need be, because he's really doing a great job. And in this episode, he actually had some moments where, the King is back, and I really appreciated it. I really enjoyed it. And so right now, for me, that would be I'm done. They king off King Ezekiel and do it in some nonchalant way like they've done some other big characters. That would really have a problem for me. I mean, they'd have to lead up to that, and we'd have to see it coming for a while for that to be okay with me at this moment.
Me personally, it's got to be Rick. And I've said this to people that I've talked to over the break about what's taken place. But if Rick goes, the story's over. For me, at least. Now, if Carl, even though I wasn't the biggest Carl fan in the world, if Carl was to live, because of his attachment to Rick, I would have continued watching the show because I think the storyline continues. But now if Rick goes, there's really no more attachment to the beginning of the show. There's really nobody left. I mean, despite Carol, but the writing for Carol is very on and off, and I'm not a Daryl fan. It wouldn't keep my ass in the seat. So I think for me, it would be Rick. If Rick goes, I would probably just watch Fear of the Walking Dead and maybe take up crocheting. Ryan, all three of us are fans of a lot of the same shows, but has there ever been a death or a series of events that just made you throw your hands up and said, fuck it, I'm done?
That's a good question. I wish I had a little bit more time to think about that. Yeah.
I'll go to IG. I'll answer.
It was momentary, but the Red Wedding in Game of Thrones absolutely made me go, fuck this show. What the fuck did you just do here? Hands were up and everything, and then the next week I was sitting right in front of the television going, all right, what are we doing? So yes, I've had the thought. I can't honestly think of anything else that I was actually intently watching that made me go, nope, I'm done after killing a character off. Most of the time, my reaction is, all right, what are they going to do without this one? And I'm going to come back and watch. Now, I might lose interest a season or even a half a season later and go, nope, this isn't working anymore, and off I go. But normally not just like they killed him and I'm out. Not for one character, or even a couple of characters.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with Ig that mostly it's, for the most part, when I want with a show that I lose interest in, I just lose interest because I just get bored over time. Rarely does one thing make me want to throw my hands up in the air. The only thing I can think of is watching. I mean, the problem is that my interest had waned in Dexter way before this moment, but like when he, spoiler, when he and his stepsister, I guess, or adopted sister kind of have a relationship, that was the kind of point where I was like, all right, I'm done. This is dumb, ridiculous. But that's the only thing I can think of right now where I like threw my hands in the air. I was like, all right, I'm done with this show.
I watched the first season of Game of Thrones. I caught up. I jumped 4 books ahead of the show, and then the Red Wedding happened, and I just kind of threw the book away, and I stopped reading for a long time. So that almost stopped me reading the book. However, show-wise, some of the deaths on The Wire really hit home. I know, real big surprise. Joe's hyping The Wire again, but Wallace's death on The Wire, which, by the way, is Michael B. Jordan from Black Panther, and Omar, because they killed Omar in the most senseless way possible. One of the best characters ever written for TV is just blown away by this just basically like 10-year-old with a gun. Just ripped my heart out because for a good 3 or 4 seasons, I did nothing but wait to see what Omar was going to do next. And I thought the show lost a lot of appeal after that. I didn't stop watching it, but it runs along. It just seemed arbitrary to me. I realized that they lived and died on the streets, but it didn't make a lot of sense.
It's funny you mentioned that because we literally 2 days ago finished rewatching The Wire. My wife had not seen it, so we watched it. And Omar's death hit her so hard that she had a hard time finishing the rest of the show. Like her mind for the rest of the time. I mean, he was killed off fairly late in season 5, but like for the last few episodes, she just couldn't stop thinking about why they like that Omar was killed off, and the manner in which he was killed off was, it was just so underwhelming. Like he deserved more. You know, if he's gonna die, he deserved to go out in like a blaze of glory or something. But to go out like that was rough. And even like literally a couple days ago, my wife went through that exact kind of feeling.
IG, back in the beginning of the season, all the way back in October, we were hit with a series of flashbacks. Flashbacks anymore in TV are usually the really good storytelling. However, we were hit again with some flashbacks, and it was a lot of buildup and no payoff once again. Are these flashbacks ever going to get explained? And is it more of a case of style over substance? We're not following the same roadmap that we would in something like Breaking Bad, where by the end of the episode, or at least by the end of the next couple episodes, we got some sort of explanation.
Oh my God. What it seems to me right now is that whole half season of flash forward, flashback, dream sequence nonsense was all Carl's vision of the future. And if that's what it ends up being, I'm going to be highly, highly disappointed. And I really hope they pay it off. They have to pay it off at least by the end of the season. Because if they that was it, because that was all leading up to Carl's death, and that's what they were pointing at for the whole season so far, I'm going to be really pissed off. I think that was just such nonsense. I mean, and now they've got Negan in them and everything. I'm like, come on.
Eugene's
really?
back like nothing's happened, and he's wearing white. I don't know, Ryan. It looked like the future, the past, the present fantasy. Did they wrongly try to steal a page out of the Westworld playbook?
The Walking Dead is not an artsy show, and when they try to do these kind of artsy sequences and it just doesn't work. And I think that's just I don't mind it being kind of Carl's vision of the future, and there might be some foreshadowing if you look at kind of the way things go in the comics, from what I understand. So I'm okay with it. I just think that's not the strength of The Walking Dead, and they rarely get it right when they go that route. And so I don't know, just kind of like, when it just like as usual, when it does that, it just kind of doesn't feel right to me. So, I'm okay with it, and I'm okay with that being his vision of the future. But just didn't resonate with me.
If it doesn't start moving that way, it's a bigger problem. That's the thing, is we're going to have to get through this war with Negan. Is it going to end the season? I mean, I don't want Negan to go away, but the war needs to head toward resolution. It doesn't have to finish, but it needs to be moving in a direction. And we haven't had any movement in 9 episodes this season now.
IG, let's talk Carl Grimes a little bit. Did you realize that he was this popular of a character? What do you think about him made him a fan favorite?
I don't know if he's as popular as he is portrayed at the moment. I think a lot of it is, they pumped it up like this is happening, and it's an emotional response to not much else has been happening. But he does seem like a genuinely nice guy. I mean, when we were at Walker Stalker, he had a big line. He seemed very engaged in his fans. He could very well have a great career. He started very young on the show, and we've basically watched him grow up. And as far as I know, thus far, he's not turned into a huge a-hole where you get all kinds of TMZ notices that he's out doing something else stupid. And so it's one of those things where it ends up that he could just very well be a likable kid that is starting to get some other opportunities. And I know that there are some people that really like Carl, but I fear that right now a lot of the Carl love is all because Carl is leaving. So, hats off to Carl, and he passed his hat on to Judith, which was awesome, but I'm not thinking that it's all as genuine as they'd like it to be, because they've not been banners and stuff created for Carl all over time. No, we got Carl Papa is what we got. So
yeah, I detest that song. I do think it's a case of just being familiar. He was there in the beginning. Now, if he would have got shot and killed at the beginning of season 2, I don't think anybody really would have batted an eye, but we have gotten a chance to see him grow up. We have got a chance to see him get his first kiss, and we were sold on a bill of goods that he was going to be the future of the show. I really think that sometimes the The writing didn't do the character justice for him. Even as a teen, he still kind of came across as a little bit morose at times and a little whiny. And it was only in the last couple episodes that they made it look like we're building towards something with this kid. It's difficult to watch, and it's only because I wanted the story to continue, and I have a feeling that a big piece of the story now is gone. Ryan Chandler Riggs handled the situation with Grayson much more maturity than his parents did. Did AMC and Scott Gimple frankly do this kid dirty?
I don't know, because I don't know what the inner, I don't know what really is going on behind the scenes. Obviously there are rumors and things have come out, but we don't know how much he wanted to leave and deal with his career, how much his parents influenced the decision, how much they wanted to get rid of him, how much of a shock it really was. So, I don't know. It's hard for me to say whether or not they did him dirty. I mean, this is part of TV, and again, it's if it's a good story, it's a good story, and I don't care who they kill off. I just don't love the way they did it and the way they played out. I think if they wanted to kill him off, they could have given it more meaning. They could have had kind of higher stakes, and his death could have been more than it felt. Really like it was an opportunity to have an end of a mid-season shock. And I think he deserved more than that. From a storytelling perspective, I think the character and the actor deserved something more than just like, oh, we're going to shock everyone at the end of the season because he's bit. I think they could have done more with it. But I don't know if they, as an actor, this comes with the territory.
Well, the things you hear coming out of it, and maybe he shouldn't have jumped until he knew, because this is TV and everything is subject to change. But it's my understanding that he did put college off for another year. It's my understanding that he did buy a house local. It's just so he could have some place to be during the show's taping. All right, IG, I'm going to appeal to the parent in you. Given the particulars of what I just told you, would you have stayed off of social media and not caused a ruckus if this was done to your child?
I wouldn't have said shit. I wouldn't have said anything. Here's the problem. All right, he's still a kid, and obviously his parents were involved and are still somewhat involved in everything, even though he's nearing adulthood or is now an adult. So he can make his own decisions and everything now, but if you're making things with him and his parents don't agree, they show the ability to go out there and run their mouth. And that's just bad press. And that's the last thing any movie house, TV studio, anybody needs, is for someone with a little bit of insider knowledge running their mouth about your program or your project. So what you've done is you've now taken this kid who had a promising, bright future and put a splotch on it and made it harder for other places to want to hire him. Because are these parents coming along? Is there going to be things thrown around if they don't like what we're doing? As a parent, you got to learn that sometimes you just shut your mouth, especially because basically that kid became a gravy train for them. All right, it was his money, but they had some control over it because he was a minor. So if they bought a house to have him be there, the parents were living there. The parents were living on Chandler Riggs' money. And you just took that gravy train and sent it down the Oregon Trail where they all got dysentery and died.
Well, to further your point, the fact that there was an uprising by them and the fact that you need to look no further than Instagram, where, the kid's his last day on the job and he's hamming it up with everybody and taking selfies and taking pictures, and his parents are in the pictures. Now, mind you, I understand that his parents have probably become friendly with the cast and crew. However, they can't be in these pictures. It just shows you why he's not a part of the show anymore. It shows you that they were always around. I believe the father had some sort of managerial say in his career. Listen, folks, if you're going into any kind of show business whatsoever or sports, do not let your fucking dad manage you. Do not let your mom have a say in your career. I understand that you don't want to give up the 7 to 10%, but hire a professional, because this hurts you in the long term. And just the rumors bandying about his parents and the fact that he's going to be looking for a next job, and it may cost him roles where they'll be like, well, we want to hire Chandler Riggs, but not his mom and dad too. I think that's going to be a huge issue for him going forward. But I don't blame Gimple. I wish they were a little more forthcoming with them and maybe not let the kid buy a house before they cut ties with him. But I think the blame is no further than his parents. I mean, his dad ran some sort of weird tour company. So there was probably, and I'm just guessing, but there was probably asked for some favors. He probably overstepped bounds. Don't have your family involved in your business. I don't bring my family to work with me. They don't poke their nose around things when I'm doing, and I don't think you do either. Ryan, let's talk about the strength of his performance on the way out the door. We talked about hoping for a quick goodbye or a long kiss, but I mean, was the acting, the dialogue, was it a fitting goodbye for a character that we've now watched for over 7 years?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, he could have, it was somewhat touching. I think the kind of montage they had early on with with him and Judith, that was the one time, the one part with him taking the pictures was a little touching, and writing the letters. And I think I think it was more Rick and Michonne did really they really were their performances were good and strong. For Carl, the problem is that he's playing somebody who's about to die and has been infected with the virus, so it's a little tough emotionally, to really pull off an emotional performance. And so I wasn't like touched by him dying, but I did feel like it played out as well as it could have, considering that they were going to let this run out the entire episode. And again, like that it was touching with him and Judith, it was touching with him and Michonne, and you really that was that one point where you could tell that there was a genuine friendship and connection there. So I think those parts worked well, but again, could have dealt with a little bit less of it. Maybe done 10 minutes, 15 minutes of it would have been good.
My thing is, I don't think that Chandler Riggs needed to act the hell out of that, because of what he did, and what I saw was that he was at peace. He was at that point where he knew he was going to die as the son, right? He was going to die, and he was ready for that, and he was just preparing everyone else. So he was just there kind of as the messenger, and it was everybody else's reaction and emotion that needed to drive that. And for the most part, it worked pretty well. Even, Daryl was moved, and you saw it, and it felt real. Michonne and Rick were devastated, and that really felt real. And the one that really surprised me, that did amazing for me and really had me with the feels, was Cinik. Cinik's recognition of what got him to that spot and what he should do to continue to honor Carl. That was the one that really hit me out of all of those, because I expected Michonne and Rick to have a huge emotional reaction to that. I expected Judith to have a reaction to it, and I know that was like clever editing to get Judith's reaction, but it worked. But Cinik really kind of surprised me in that whole thing.
I don't know if I want Cinik honoring anybody else. I mean, this is how Carl got bit, was the fact that he was out there honoring his mom. I'd be like, no, Cinik, don't honor me. We're good. We're even. It's all fair and square. What I find interesting about The Walking Dead is that what other job, based on your last day's performance, might get you your next gig? You can't say that about many other jobs in the whole wide world. Like, the strength of his performance very well may get him roles down the road. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever left a job or not, but the last day of work, you don't do shit. You come in and you just kind of ride with your feet up the whole day, and hopefully they have some sort of cake for you if you're not a complete dick. And then you go about your way, and you try to keep in contact with the people you like, and you just move on about yourself. But I just found it interesting that because he was so strong at his acting, that it might possibly lead to other roles down the road, where they really didn't give Carl a lot to do in past seasons.
Well, Chandler Riggs did get to spend the whole last day like laying on his back, so it's pretty close to what you said.
With Carl no longer a part of the show, Ryan, and the possibility of Maggie leaving, does it help or hurt the show to break from the source material so drastically?
I'm kind of belabor this point, but it just comes down to how good the writing is. I think as you drift away from the source material, it could go either way. If you have a strong writing team and a strong creative team and strong actors that have been developed, and that we put our own kind of belief and faith and trust in, I think the show can be strong. But if not, or if it's kind of flying by the seat of its pants, then that's problematic. And so I think at this point, for various reasons, the show's lost a lot of its trust in viewers. I think it had the lowest ratings. I just read it. It hit the ratings for this episode were not good, and so if they want to win back the trust in in the viewers, they got to figure something out. And I think it just comes down to the writing. I think they've strayed enough from the source material now that you can't kind of put the toothpaste back into the
tube. The
Tube. It's a tube.
All right, the tube. Sorry.
Okay, let me put it this way to you, IG. You're a fan of the comic books. Does the Walking Dead TV show work better when it follows the Walking Dead comic book or when it strays and kind of takes its own path?
Well, when it strays a little bit, it does just fine. Like little hiccups and everything. Like we've talked before, how Daryl's not in the comic books. Daryl works fine in most of the stuff, and he's had some absolute badass moments that I've completely appreciated. But when you get too far off that path, that's when it gets goofy. And they're trying to make up stories that just don't make any sense. And you got to realize probably the people that are actually writing the comic spend a lot of time developing the story before they draw any frames. And that's what they're missing is they're trying to get content out because they have deadlines to meet, but they're not worrying about, is this coherent? Is it fun? Does it make sense? Is it engaging? And is the writing strong? Are the characters going to say some stupid things, or is it going to be something that's going to have fans cheering for them? I mean, these things are really causing a problem because they've just spent half a season, now greater than half a season, not going anywhere. And if that doesn't start changing real soon, this season could technically spell the end of The Walking Dead because they're going to start losing advertisers. And I don't want that to happen because when it's great, it's great. And when it's good, it's still pretty good. But lately, it hasn't even been good.
Well, they're signed for 9. They'll get a full 9 because even if it drops, the bottom drops out of it, I have a feeling we'll get a full season of 9. 10, on the other hand, isn't written in stone. Ryan, does it speak to the fact that character development might be a little wobbly when you're only interesting just before you die? Like, hey, that Ryan George guy, I used to think he was lame, but right before he got hit with that bus, there was a moment of brilliance.
Yeah, that's problematic because we have such a huge cast of characters and great actors that have gone through this show. And there is a bit of a character development problem. And it does seem like, we only really, when we get to know somebody well, they're off. And, it's something that maybe if they're going to reset their course and get the show back on the right tracks, maybe it takes really a season or two of redeveloping some characters and really getting us behind some people, because it feels like, outside of maybe this season, Ezekiel and Morgan, who's gone after the end of the season, most of the characters kind of just seem like they're in the same place, or they're going through the same cycle. And who's really developed besides Ezekiel? Like, who's had a real character arc, beyond kind of your standard arc? Like, I think it's problematic, and we really need to see some growth. And maybe maybe they're planting the seeds with Cinik, but otherwise, I think that's going to be part of the show. It'll sink or swim over the next season, I think, on whether or not they can really start getting us to get behind some of these characters again. And again, if they start telling stories that we're really interested in.
IG, where does this leave Rick and Michonne? As parents, there's just no time to grieve. I mean, there's a war to win, right? And are the Saviors and Negan in a fuck ton of trouble at this point?
They could very well be, unless Judith gets in the way. But, Judith comes and goes at convenience lately, which is still weird to me because now who's watching her? Apparently Daryl is, but is he going to put like a baby seat on the back of the motorcycle or something? I'm waiting. I want to know. But I don't know. I would hope that there's going to be hell to pay. I mean, Carl's death, ironically, has nothing to do with Negan, which is almost disappointing. I think maybe I would have been more into it if Negan's action had resulted in Carl's death, but it really had nothing to do with Negan. It was Carl out doing things that he should have been doing, and it just happened to be that he found somebody and was going to bring him back and got in a tuffle with some walkers and got bit. And it was almost lazy, if not sad, the way that it happened. And like I said, I'd rather that it happened with Negan to give Michonne and Rick the fire they need to just, if they're going to have all-out war like they've been saying, to actually turn this into all-out war.
Yeah, and you make a great point because at this stage, the arc right now seems to be that Carl's dying wish is that Rick essentially saves Negan. That Rick, we will come to a moment where Rick can kill Negan or save his life, and that Carl wants him to make the decision to save him. He doesn't want him to be, he doesn't, if he wants him to doesn't want him to be Negan, and that is much more effective if Negan's the one responsible for Carl's death, and otherwise, like, yeah, it just loses that effectiveness. And I think it loses, again, Carl's death doesn't mean all that much because he died doing something stupid. Like, here's Carl who's grown over the last season, and his death is down to him just being dumb and doing something that he really shouldn't have been doing. And so it's just Carl being a child, all this growth, and it was just still Carl being a naive child that caused his death. And there's so much more value if Negan was somehow really responsible. So I think they really dropped the ball there, more so than like whether or not killing Carl wasn't a bad decision. It was like how they killed him that was problematic.
IG, whispers have it that Andy Lincoln is extremely disappointed with this, stating that he saw Carl as the future of the show and being very close with Chandler, basically raising him throughout the course of the show. Do you think this maybe hurts the amount of time that he stays? Do you think this affects how long he stays with the show, or does he stay longer to try to make up for that big glaring hole they now left in the plot line?
The problem I see here is that if it really did affect him emotionally, especially because he really liked having him there and really wanted him there and saw him as the future, is that they're going to have to pay him to keep him around. And they're going to have to probably up his salary to keep him interested. Now, he did a great job in this episode. I have no complaints about Rick's acting in this episode. He seemed engaged and he seemed like he was nailing it down. But to keep him interested in 9, 10, and future, you're really going to have to get him some paychecks, because if you took out something that he saw as the future and the way to make this show work, you're going to need to have some kind of anticipation, or either that, or they're going to have to bring in like J.J. Abrams and a bunch of people to come write scripts for this, because the writing has not been up to par. I mean, they've had much better writing. Maybe they need to go find those people that had the better episodes, the higher rated episodes, and just give them more money to come in and write more episodes. There's been some problem going on that they really need to rectify, and part of it's going to really revolve around Rick, because you're right. If Rick goes, what are they going to do with the rest of this show? It's going to be really problematic. Nobody else is strong enough to take over the Rick role.
Never going to give you. Hey, listen. How many wins have Rick actually had over the course of these last 8 seasons? He's been beaten down, and it's only gotten worse. I mean, the oppression of his character has only gotten worse over the seasons. Now he's on his knees, and he's groveling, and he's crying, and snot's flying out of his mouth. It has to take something from you. Knowing you're going into work that day, and you've got to deal with the fact that your wife was just killed. Now, going into work, you know that you've got to deal with the fact that your fake TV son was just killed. It's got to be draining emotionally and mentally. And we don't know how much Andy Lincoln has left in the tank. Only he knows that. Something tells me that, a progressive bump in salary will probably keep him around. But Rick Grimes needs a win. And he doesn't need a skin of your teeth win so we make Jeffrey Dean Morgan look up. He needs a grand slam walk-off win. Or I wouldn't keep coming to work either. I mean, you can only be beaten down so long emotionally and mentally and continue to want to do this. But Ryan, let's get away from all that. And let's talk about Gavin. As a person, could you understand his level of frustration with Ezekiel? Part frustrated parent, part Scooby-Doo villain. Why, Ezekiel? Why? I liked you. You had it. Was he actually really torn and talked while he was talking down to this guy? Was he upset that Ezekiel just disregarded the agreement they had?
I mean, it seems like of all the saviors, he's the most sympathetic. And I think he seems like the one that kind of gets it, and you feel like he deep down he's probably a decent person, but he's doing what he's got to do to survive with the saviors, and so he's not gonna past, doing some messed up stuff, but he I think deep down he is a decent person. So yeah, you definitely, and he plays it well. I think that part of the show worked well. We just didn't get a lot of it, but I think it does work well. And his dynamic with Ezekiel has always been really interesting because, yeah, again, it's one of somebody who is decent. And then you see that Ezekiel kind of knows that, and he's trying to speak to that part of him. Obviously it doesn't quite work, but I actually really enjoyed their scenes together. I think his performance was really great, really good, and obviously Ezekiel is always great.
And we would have got away with it if it wasn't for Ezekiel and Jerry. Gavin's played by a guy by the name of Jason Warner Smith. He's an amazing actor. I loved some of the things he did with the character. I loved his amount of fury that he showed against Jared after he shot Benjamin. I loved the scene where they were standing out on the dock and Rick was basically counting down and he's like, whoa, can we have a minute here? And I loved his interaction with Ezekiel because you could tell that he was torn. IG, do you think if Gavin was found maybe earlier in the apocalypse, he pretty much really could be Team Rick, right?
Absolutely. I mean, or just Team Ezekiel. He could have been in the kingdom, just a really useful member of that community. Could have absolutely been Team Rick. And it's just matter of circumstance, and just like Ryan said, doing what he needs to do to survive. And I don't think it's got anything to do with that's how he wants to do things. I think that's how he needs to do things, because he sees if he doesn't do it, Negan is going to kill him, and he's at least going to get the iron, but probably going to kill him. So he's just trying to keep himself alive, and he would rather not. And he knows that if Ezekiel had just kept doing what Ezekiel was supposed to do, there would be no problem. And he could just keep doing his part and going there and picking up, cantaloupes, and everything was fine. But, he more than any other savior at this point seems like somebody that was just torn. I mean, even when we saw, what's his name, Morales come back, he was full on Team Negan. He had no problem being on that side. But almost all of the saviors have no problem being on that side. Except for Gavin. Gavin seems like it's like, I just want to do my job and go back and eat pickles with Eugene.
I see myself in Gavin. Like, I feel like if I was in that situation, I would, and I'm a savior. I'm definitely doing what Negan says. I don't want to get the iron. I don't want to get my head bashed in. But and then I would do what I got to do, but I try to be a nice guy about it. And then in that situation where I know deep down Ezekiel's right, the way that he keeps saying it, it's like he's not trying to convince Ezekiel, he's trying to convince himself, and it sounds like he's trying to tell himself that it's Ezekiel's fault. You did it, you had it great, and it almost sounds more like he's trying to tell himself that versus trying to talk down to Ezekiel. And I feel like I'd be in that same spot, like knowing that I'm the bad guy, but trying to push it off on Ezekiel.
Okay, Ryan, let me put you in Gavin's shoes for a second then. You like Ezekiel. You know that he's right. You know that Negan's a tyrant and a savage. You know what's going to happen to this guy that you already expressed fondness for. And Ezekiel's making a convincing argument that, hey, Ryan, why don't we walk this back? This isn't set in stone. You don't have to die. We don't have to do this. What's the percentage chance you change your mind and say, all right, Ezekiel, I'm going to roll with you from here on out?
I mean, yeah, at this stage, like, Negan has like 1,000 lives. So do you really, like, at this point, they've escaped and he's on a warpath. I think I take my chances.
This is Ryan George, Only Ryan George would be like that. No, I've got King Ezekiel, who is able to have a tiger as his best friend. And no, they can't do anything to Negan now. Negan doesn't have his machine guns anymore. All kinds of other problems. Probably just lost a whole bunch of people. Expended more than half of their ammo just to go ahead and get out of the... Nope, still going with Negan. Come on, Ryan.
Ryan will do 1,000 push-ups, but when it comes to policy, it's path of least resistance. All right, IG, your life is in any two characters' hands on The Walking Dead. Which two would you have come and rescue you?
Carol and Morgan.
You're goddamn right.
They fucking get shit done. They're in super secret stealth ninja mode like 90% of the time, and they get shit done. Those two are, they could very well be Batman and Robin, and they're interchangeable in the spot any day of the week. Oh my God, they are just, when they set their mind to this is what we're going to go do, that's what they go do. And nobody's going to stop them. Nobody's going to get in their way. they'll just mow through everything. And Carol and Morgan, if I need two people in that whole show to trust everything I have to, that's who gets it, hands down.
All right, Ryan, I know we live about 100 miles apart, but I could hear you physically sigh when this happened, and it was my pet peeve of the show, too. Does the element of surprise work against a force with superior numbers that actually have cover, and you're just going to stand outside and just spray bullets into them?
Yeah, that didn't make sense. I mean, as great as Morgan and Carol are, and they are awesome, they're a great duo. I mean, that was some serious plot armor there, and that just didn't make any sense. But yeah, nothing I could say. It was like it really did take me out of it, because there's a situation, like, we buy into how badass they are, and that scene, they could have set the whole same setup, right? That they're holed up in there, they're secure. There's a way to write that scene where Morgan and Carol, come up with a badass way to figure, to get out of that situation, or get into and out of that situation with Ezekiel. But the way it played out is just shows the problem with the show right now, is that they just write themselves into bad situations and write themselves out of it poorly.
IG, we're both big fans of King Ezekiel, and Ezekiel calmly tries to explain to Gavin, listen, you don't need to do this. We can walk this back. What version of the king do you like more? The very calm prophet explaining things, or the over-the-top D&D king that just yells out catchphrases and you want to follow him into battle? Which one scares you more, and which one do you like more?
I like both versions dependent on the circumstance. The one that scares me more, if I was on the other side with some dudes shouting out that D&D shit, I'd be terrified. Like, if you have the wherewithal to stand out in this battlefield with people dropping all over the place, to still start screaming hark and thus and thusly, and yeah, you are a special kind of crazy, and we need to respect you. On the other side, when you're basically all your chips are down, and you're only showing that you've got like a low pair of threes, and you're trying to talk the other guy down, and it's making sense, I gotta like it. He's like, this may not be what wins in the end. You might want to think this back. We can maybe fix everything. Both parts have something to play in this, but I guess which one scares me more is D&D captain there. He does something special, but it also inspires me, which is great on both sides.
I guess, Ryan, that whole we do not kill thing is out the window, as Morgan was just with reckless abandon stabbing saviors in the neck with a spear like it was going out of style. I mean, how long at this point can Morgan's fragile sanity stay intact?
That's Morgan. I think Morgan's just he's unhinged. He's always it's great performance, because he always seems like he's just a step away from just snapping. So yeah, I mean that's who he is. I mean, he could be Terminator, he could be the non-violent, he's all over the place, but I mean, that's just the character, which is I'm gonna try to, when the season ends, I'm gonna try to catch up on Fear the Walking Dead, only because I love the character, and he's enough to make me try to give Fear the Walking Dead a chance. And from what I understand, it's getting better, but it's kind of sad that he's leaving this show, because he is just such a great, interesting, dynamic, and nuanced character. And again, like, that's the one guy who's really developed, he's developed over the years, but this season, I mean, he and Ezekiel have really shown some great development, but we're gonna lose him.
IG, what were your thoughts on Morgan sticking his hand in somebody's bullet hole and ripping out their guts? Was that a little too savage for cable TV, or were you right there with him?
I think that was pre-zombie kill of the week, right? Because he would have turned one way or another, so he just got him early. So we'll call it zombie kill of the week, just add a pre to it. Man, though, was that savage. And it was something that they'd never done on this show, and I certainly did not expect it. But oh my goodness, and that to know that this is on a prime time, just a cable network, and don't need any kind of special fees really to get it, and it was just, oh my goodness, like, I didn't see it coming. I had no idea. Like, I thought, and when he started going after it, I'm like, he's just going to poke his finger in there because it's going to hurt. Nope, whole hand, pulls it. I thought he was going to wrap it around his neck, and now you have a tie. I don't know. Start coming up with some Schwarzenegger-like puns or something. I don't know.
That was slightly over the top for me. I call that, hey, let me help you get that bullet out of you before you get an infection. That was terrible. But in the end, all the pieces are moving towards Hilltop, the last stronghold of the King, the Widow, and the Rick Alliance. Ryan, do you think they're setting up for a final showdown? What did you think of the episode, the direction of the show, and what's your rating?
It looks like it's setting up for a final showdown, but it seems early for that. But intuitively, I think, okay, it's early. We've got 7 episodes, but this is The Walking Dead. They can take an entire season to cover like 12 hours. So I wouldn't put it past them to draw this out, and have the final battle at Hilltop, which would kind of piss me off, if it goes like that. But, I didn't expect much for the episode, and I didn't get all that much. I really loved the stuff with Morgan and Carol. Logic aside, I think they're a great team, and everything that happened there works really well. I love the I love the stuff with Ezekiel. I think all that stuff works there, and I wish we got more of that. And that's when the show is really strong. The stuff with Carl, like, we got a send off. Again, there were some emotional beats that did work. Some parts it didn't. It was just a little drawn out. Again, we kind of start the season off where there's not a ton of movement forward. We didn't get anything at Hilltop. We didn't get any of Negan. So it's just a little frustrating that the show it moves at the snail's pace, and it continues to move at a snail's pace even for an hour and a half season premiere. We're not much further past where we left last season. So, the first half of the season. So, I'll give it a 6. I think there were some strong points. There were some weaker points. Wasn't my favorite episode. Wasn't my least favorite episode. So I think I give it a solid 6.
If I was The Walking Dead's father, I would sit them down and have a heart-to-heart talk. This episode was good, but it could have been a lot better. I'm going to give it a 6 as well. Honor was the exact opposite of what I wanted in this premiere, but that being said, the cast straight saved this one for me. We were extremely lucky that Chandler, Andy, Denai, Lenny, all of them brought it. It was just stellar acting from the whole cast. A lot of hard goodbyes, and we only have 7 episodes left to salvage the season. Or the Massives may not return for season 9, and you might not get a season 10. Listen, Walking Dead, you're losing your way. It wasn't a complete loss, but we at the show all want to wish Chandler well. In the end, ironically, it was Carl's inability to stay in the goddamn house, which was eventually his undoing. That and that god-awful hat.
Yeah, that hat has seen better days for sure. I was glad to see it go to Judith, but it's going to fall apart in the next 2 weeks, so it's really neither here nor there. I did enjoy the show. I'm right along with Ryan at a 6. Not the worst episode, not the best episode. There were some great jump out of my seat moments, but there was a lot of other moments where I was like, can we just kind of get this moving along? That being said, I'm really hoping that they've taken their time now, right? They've kind of lulled themselves through 9 episodes of a 16-episode season. Now it's time to kick this pig into gear and get it moving. So that's what I'm hoping is going to happen, that there's nothing now to hold them back, right? They can't be at Alexandria because it's just been mortared to death. They really can't go back to the kingdom because the saviors have kind of overrun that and there's nothing left there for them to do. They're going to go to Hilltop, gather their forces, and off we go to war. Maybe it'll be trench warfare. Maybe it'll be guerrilla warfare. Whatever works, got to get on it. They showed their guerrilla tactics worked better in the earlier episodes last season and this season. I'm hoping that it all comes together. I have faith still. They've got time to salvage this season, and it could end up being a very good season if they get somewhere toward the end. And that's going to do it for this episode of The Walking Dead Underground, where we talked about the mid-season premiere of Season 8, titled Honor. And it was an outright honor to bring it to you. I'm Igrihe, and with me were Cinik and Ryan. We had a great time this week. Hopefully you had a great time listening. Do us a favor, share it with your family, friends, anybody you know. They're going to want to catch up on The Walking Dead just like you are. We appreciate every single listen we get from every one of you, and we love every listen we're going to get in the future. You can also head over to tpublic.com, search for Cinik, C-I-N-I-K, and you can get your own Walking Dead Underground gear. The coolest t-shirts you could possibly imagine can be yours right now. Please head over there, take a look. We'll be back next week with the next episode of The Walking Dead. That one's going to be The Lost and the Plunderers. We're kind of excited. This is going to start to take off here pretty soon. But until next time, don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and at thewalkingdeadunderground.com. Join us in our fight against the saviors.